At Fever Tree, we think whether it's a gin and tonic, a delicious mule, or a sparkling Paloma, if 3/4 of your drink is the mixer, shouldn't it be made with the finest ingredients, mixed with the best? Fever Tree.
What is happening, Potion? Just welcome back to another episode of the Potion Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. We've had some technical difficulties this morning. Nothing too crazy, just some gremlins in the system. So we're trying this as a 2.0. I was mentioning that this gentleman we've got on today, Sean Kenyon, he's got a couple of bars out of Denver that are legacy bars in, I would say, in US, especially North America and in the world, which I'm really looking forward to chatting about legacy. He's a multi-generational bartender. He's third generation. He's been doing this for about 40 years. So we're both older dogs in the industry, which are fantastic. He's been on my vision board for a really long time. And I think he either reached out or I reached out when I was like trying to put together my schedule for the end of the year. So I'm really looking forward to this chat. And hopefully the gremlins are now done and they've been fed and they can leave us alone. Good morning, Sean. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you, man?
Good, man. So as I was mentioning in the intro, you're a multi-generational bartender. For anybody who doesn't know your story, because it is one of those most romantic bar stories, I find. Like it's the bar story that most people would love to like be able to tell. Can you tell everybody your backstory as well as like how you got into the industry yourself?
Right. So, my mother, my father, and my grandfather were all bartenders. My father was the last one to retire about 7 years ago now, 2018, when he was 72, after
Wow.
bartending for 50 plus years. I grew up in bars. Like it was the bars, my grandfather's bar, was really early on. I was not really old enough to remember being in my grandfather's bars. But my dad's bar mainly, we would, come home from school, go to the bars, wait till my mom got off of work to come pick us up. And then, she would go to her bar. She would turn us over on some nights she would turn us over to a babysitter and she would go to her bar job because my mom worked two jobs. So I was literally raised by the bar, and not just my father, but my father's the patrons and the guests that my father had at his bar. I was not a popular kid. I was an overweight kid with not a lot of friends, and felt as like an outcast at school. It was a struggle for me. And my father's bar was the first place that I found like unconditional love and acceptance outside of my family. I mean, people that weren't my mom, my dad, or my brother that loved me just because I was there, and they took care of me. They watched after me when my father was busy. They fed me quarters for, I'm gonna reach here for some people who might have seen it, but Pac-Man and asteroids and pinball, some of the things. I'm 56 years old, so I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. I was born in 1969, so we're talking in the 70s. So pre-video games, even we had pinball machines. So that watched after us. And I grew up and I learned. I looked at bartenders when I was a kid. Being an unpopular kid with not a lot of friends, looking at the bartenders telling stories and take care of people, and everybody loved them. And I didn't realize this until I was older. It's not like I looked at bartenders and, really early on, I was like, I have to be a bartender. But I gravitated towards bartending because they were the entertainers. They were the people sat down and they immediately loved them. And I was like, that is the way for me to be loved when I wasn't, when I didn't feel that outside of the bar world. And, I was also very shy at one point in my life. So, and not a lot of confidence, and bartending gave me confidence. Once I stepped behind the bar for the first time, I felt, I felt it, and I found my confidence and I found my way that translated into the rest of my life. I went from being a shy and quiet person to a super gregarious person, transformed through bartending.
Yeah, I talk to people about my wife calls it my Hulk and my banner. Like
Yeah.
behind the bar, I'm Hulk. Like
Yeah.
if I'm in a social situation. I got social anxiety, so I don't love crowds. But you
Yeah.
put me behind the bar, I'm fucking king. Like,
Yeah.
put me behind the bar, I'm king.
It's so similar. Even at big industry events, we see, our friends that are, and people that we gravitate to, and we get these little 3-second conversations with people as we're passing, or like screaming into each other's ears because the music is really loud or whatever it is. Like, I much prefer quieter settings with my friends. Big parties, like, even especially, I'm gonna blow this one out. Like, I tails parties to me suck. Like, I mean, I work them, and we run a ton of them, but being on the other side of it, when you're elbow to elbow and you're holding onto a drink in an 8-ounce cup, and you're getting swayed with the crowd like that, I don't get to have quality conversations with my friends and peers and colleagues and catching up with them at those things.
Yeah.
It's fun. You dance, you're jumping around, you're enjoying the vibe and the energy, but I got about a half hour to 45 minute shelf life for those parties. And maybe it's because we're a couple of graybeards, that's the way, but even early on, I mean, when I first started getting, going to tails, I felt like an outcast. Like, I wasn't part of the cool kids club in 2006, 2007. A lot of those people who were in the cool kids club have become my friends over the years, but I was quiet and off in the corner like a wallflower a little bit, because I didn't feel as comfortable. And it took a while for me to, plus I looked a lot different than they did. I didn't have arm garters and I wasn't wearing a vest outside of the bar, any of those things. I mean, I look like I do now, outside of the bar, and I didn't feel like I needed to wear a bartender outfit when I went to a, let's show everybody I'm a bartender. I mean, I will admit I did have a curly mustache at one point, but I did.
Spirit Halloween character.
Yeah. I mean, there was that. I mean, I do a hospitality seminar where I have this Lego bartender that I flash on screen, and it's got all the affectations, the arm garter, the many bottles of rye, the curly mustache, the braces, all the good stuff, all the stuff that people used to wear in 2005, 2008 to signal to other people that they were bartenders.
So with this massive family legacy, and this evolution of yourself growing up in the bar, what are some of the principles and lessons you've learned that you still hold dear to yourself now operating your own businesses?
Right. It's one thing I learned, my father was my biggest influence in bartending. I didn't get to sit at my mother's bar a lot because she worked at a biker bar at night. And we were being watched, but my father's bar, I got to be there during the day and in the evenings. And my father like brought everybody into his space and made everybody feel like they were the only person in the room. Like, watching him bartend and watching him take care of people was incredibly influential. He never sat me down and said, "This is what you do. This is how you make people feel welcome." But I learned from him that, we have it in our hands. We have this precious moment, right? If somebody feels ignored all day, they feel insignificant at work, they feel like, they feel under pressure, and they walk into your bar and you ignore them, or you don't make eye contact with them, you don't make them feel welcome right away, you're just continuing that feeling that they've had all day. But if they've felt ignored and insignificant at work, and then they walk in and you make them feel like they have that cheers moment, like you say their name right away, you welcome them to their seat, they're like, all of a sudden the malaise or the feeling they had all day is transformed, right? And they're now welcome into a community that accepts them, right? And we have that, we have that opportunity, like in the first 30 seconds of our interactions of when they walk in the door. I would even argue to say it's quicker than that, and the greeting and making people feel welcome is the most important thing to us. So we do that. Like our staffs, I took that into my bartending, for the years I bartended. I was bartending for 25 years before I owned a bar, 26 years before I owned a bar. And I wanted to take all those principles that I learned from my father that I had picked up in bartending and transform that into our staff. So our staffs are eyes up, they people walk in the room, everybody says hello to them. They look, even if we're having conversations with guests, we stand up, we go eyes up and say hello to people and guide them to where they are, because the guests in front of us will understand that we have other guests to take care of, right? I don't have to like be in such an in-depth conversation that I can't recognize somebody. But that doesn't translate just to our guests. Like, I talk all the time about hospitality being as important with your peers, if not more important, than it is with your guests. So when you walk in a room every day, when you see everybody at work, you say hello to everybody in the building. I make it's a habit of mine to say hello to everybody in the building. I have 2 buildings that are next to each other at the bars. I say hello to everybody in the building when I walk in, and I say goodbye to everybody in the building when I walk out. Except for the few occasions over the years where I've Irish goodbye, when I've not felt like, I've not felt like I was in any shape to say goodbye to anybody. I try not to, to be there, but there's been exceptions, but it's really important, for people to know that you're there and that you're present, and you're part of their team. And then when you leave, that, they know that you're not there any longer. I think that, that hospitality is so important, that peer-to-peer hospitality, because without that, it's very difficult for the hospitality we shine forward to exist. The lateral hospitality is as important as the hospitality that we shine forward to the people in front of us, because without one, it's very difficult for the other to exist.
How do you portray that in this day and age? Because I'm sure you've heard it. Like, as we get older in the industry, we post-pandemic, we gain a lot of like, oh, these kids, and I think every generation says,
yeah,
every generation always says, these kids don't know how easy they've got it, that sort of thing. How are you evolving this definition and this sort of training in hospitality for this next generation coming up? I know that you've got a lot of long-term staff in all your venues, which is awesome. It's something I talk about on a regular basis, and sometimes get like vindicted a little bit against, like my preaching, my screaming into the thing about staff retention. But how are you evolving this definition of hospitality? Because it's obviously a very passion point for you, for this next generation and the bartenders that you are bringing up through the ranks.
Right. So, it's hospitality is one of those things that doesn't have, it's not dated, right? It's not something that existed in the 70s and doesn't exist now, or that you can't learn. I think we've changed as a society to where, our entertainment used to be, people to people. It used to be in conversation, used to be in person, used to be body language and all of those things. We've changed as a society over the years to where, a lot of us are buried in this, this little box in front of us all the time. And that's what people are learning from a very young age now. Right. And bars were the original social media, bars and restaurants and gathering places. You made eye contact with people, you met people you didn't know, you had to make small talk until you found common interests, and then got into deeper conversations. Like, teaching younger people now, like, I think there's a danger here for us, for you and I, and even something that I faced as, somebody in my 30s going into tales. Like, I don't want to be the old guy on the hill, the old guy sitting on his porch with a, I'm sitting on my porch right now. I am literally the old guy sitting on my porch, but, with a gun across his lap, like, get off my lawn, right? You don't want to be like, we had it so hard. I mean, the honest truth of it is, when I started bartending, I had to take people's phone numbers, right? I had to keep them I had a literal little black book, and I would call people from a landline with a cord, to call people to tell them to come visit me on my shifts. I had it, that's how I built my shifts that weren't great into great shifts, right? I worked on my own to do it, right? And now I think that bartenders have so much at their fingertips and social media and everything, that, that it's almost like they have too much opportunity to do it. So they, that gets drowned out. And the personal call, the saying, hey, I'm working tonight, why don't you come by and, I'll buy you a drink, and, that kind of thing doesn't really exist anymore. So we have to find ways to personally connect. And we talk to people about building, building regulars and how that works, right? It's actually building relationships. You don't build it with the intention of, building it, like you're looking at their wallet, like how much are they going to bring to you? If you build a personal relationship with a guest, and it doesn't have to be super personal, you know what I mean? But a familiarity with your guests, they're going to come back to that familiarity, right? They're going to come back to the thing that they're not getting all day because they're on a computer or on a phone all day. You know, and teaching the value of that to younger, newer bartenders. I mean, if I look, there's most of our bartenders have, you know, they're not as old as I mean, they're not even as old as the length of time I've been bartending. I've been bartending this year was 40 years of bartending, right? Hardly any of our staff is 40.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of experience I can share without being like, you know, back in my day, this is what we did, but bringing valuable lessons out of that without condescending to them, talking about, you know, how valuable that was. And I don't want those lessons that I'm talking about to ever sound like that. I want to be like, you know, it's cool that I was, you know, that the way I started my shifts, you know, going in my shifts was calling people on the phone. I learned from that. Right. You know, I learned how to build a following, or, you know, or regulars that way, or to make people feel special, like you wanted them to come down and visit you. Right. I want to teach that lesson without being like, you know, you kids have it all easy. You know, it's really not the way. And I also want to keep my bartending skills sharp enough so that when I step behind the bar with our staff, they can see that I still know what I'm doing.
That's
awesome. That's really important.
So fast forward into 2011, 2010, when you started looking at doing William and Graham and opening your own place. 14 years for a bar in this day and age is insane. I've been lucky enough to talk to like Julie Reiner about Clover Club, and like those 2010s were just the chef's kiss, like where we really had come from. And I think there's people in our sort of demographic that we've seen it go from really, really bad to where we're at now. And
right.
Massive flow. What was the driver behind opening your own place in 2011?
Yeah. And without insulting any of our friends, I read, to go back to like 2006, 2007, when I started to read about all, you know, these bars that were opening and cocktail bars, you know, and back then I thought to myself, like, man, I really don't know. Like, I've been standing in front of these bottles for 25 years or 20 years at the time. And, you know, I don't know all this cocktail construction and, you know, the stuff that I knew about hospitality, and I knew how to make basic drinks. I shook the shit out of my Manhattans. I did all the things that I learned over the years. You know, I grew up in the age of bartending. That was the age of convenience, you know, sour mix on the gun, all those kind of things, you know, like that was the way we learned. And we were just fine. You know, we were making people happy, but, you know, seeing how we were evolving, you know, was really important. So I saw in reading in print magazines, mostly about some of these bars that were opening in New York and San Francisco. I went out to them and Chicago. I spent my own money to go out to them and check them out. And I was wowed by what the product they put onto the bar. Like, I was like, I've never had anything like that. I never heard of an infusion before. We're not even getting into fat washing, you know, like, you know, the only infusions you would see, you would go to a nightclub where they had a bunch of pineapples in a thing full of vodka, right? You know, the smoothies, right? That they would just pour the tap out, you know, and there was gummy bears or pineapples or whatever, you know, that was the infusions that I had heard of at that point. And as much as I was wowed by the product they were putting on the bar, I was really incredibly underwhelmed by the level of hospitality that I saw. Like, I didn't matter. The guests didn't matter in a lot of the places. And a lot of the people who own these bars have become friends of mine over the years. And we talk about that time. You know, and I'll argue this, well, I feel like a lot of them forgot about hospitality. It's because they were so focused on the science and the craft of bartending. That was an important period in the renaissance of what we do, right? That they were so focused on the science that you know, hospitality got left behind in some places, right? But they learned, you know, that caught back up, right? But that period was really important. So I didn't want to own a cocktail bar. Like, I was approached by my eventual business partner in 2010, and he was, you know, he basically wanted to open a prohibition era speakeasy. He wanted to open like a a Disney World, like a It's a Small World prohibition style, right? It's like a concept bar. I mean, he had in his original business plan had flapper dresses in the for the servers, and it was all the things that you would never want behind your bar, right? Like now thinking about it, it was like 20s theme music plus.
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to 20s theme music? It 10 15 minutes, 20s music, like 15 minutes you are done. You don't, nothing you want. There's no vibe to
Yeah.
it. There's no energy.
10
Oh,
hour
it's
shift.
awful. Oh God, 10-hour shifts. I couldn't imagine it. So he gave me his business plan, which was I didn't love, but I looked at it and I came back to him and I said, look, man, this is what I want to do. I want to do all the things that they're doing behind their bars at some of these amazing places, but I want to bring in neighborhood bar style hospitality. And I'm not saying that was groundbreaking. I'm sure there was people that were doing it in a lot of places that that I just hadn't been able to see yet. But the combination of really great hospitality and really great drinks, I had not seen up to that point. And that's just because of my limited amount of travel. I'm not saying it didn't exist. We went to go meet with him and our financial partner at the time, and the guy who did the books, and my wife came along with me because my wife Bijou is an incredible judge of character. And mind you, at this point, I had turned down I think it was almost 16, 17 business plans. This was the
Wow.
18th that I'd seen over the years. Um, because I think mostly because I was afraid of becoming a bar owner. I was afraid of turning, of doing something I was completely comfortable with, which is making money for other people with not a lot of responsibility, into something I wasn't comfortable with, right? And is being responsible all of a sudden for 30, 40 people who were employed by us, right? Um, so we walked out. We met with them. Everything was great. We had a great dinner. We walked out of it, and I said, my wife and I were walking to the car, and I was like, she's like, what do you think? I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't think. She was like, that went well. You're basically like, that went well. Like, she was like, shit or get off the pot. Like, don't, I think her exact words were, don't be a pussy, but something of that sort. And she was like, you have to, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to do it eventually, and nothing's going to be perfect. Right. So, I called them back the next day and said, let's do this. And this is how I want to adjust our business plan. I called it our business plan right away, and our concept. And let's do it. And we had zero idea of what we were doing when we got started. Like, it was insane how no clue we had. We tried to chainsaw ice blocks inside the building. Like, behind our bar. It
Oh,
was,
that's never going to end well.
oh no, I don't know what we were thinking. Like, it's myself and Jason Patz like got behind the bar, and we got our first ice block. We're gonna make ice blocks, and we're gonna do this thing, and had a chainsaw. It was fun, man. I mean, all the mistakes we made were hilarious in the first couple of years, but we built the place ourselves. It was very much a DIY project. We didn't have a lot of money. We ended up with an angel investor at the end who came in and finished the financing for us. Um, and we were able to make it down, and we were able to make it happen, which is, a long way across the finish line. Anybody who opens a bar knows, like, we took possession of the building in January 2011, and we were supposed to open in June 2011, and we opened in November 2011.
That tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ask any of my friends anymore, like, when's your bar gonna open?
I always say, when someone says something like soon, it's just soon.
Yeah. Well, we went from an exact date, like June 15th, to midsummer, late summer, early fall, sometime in 2011. And it happened.
But even like I'm in a small market on the West Coast here in Victoria, BC, and we've been crunching away at cocktail culture for 16, 17 years now. Like, I took over Clive's in 2009. Denver while it's a big city, it's still a very small market in comparison to that. So how has the market changed for you? Like, you guys were one of the very first, like, proper cocktail bars concepts in Denver. How has that changed
Right.
over the years?
It's really insane, man. When we opened a speakeasy style cocktail bar opened 8 months before we did, um, in downtown Denver on Larimer Square, and they unfortunately shut down 2 years ago. New Year's Eve was their last night, and we had a lot of hope that they would like were able to see for 8 months, like, was Denver interested in this?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that is needed in our landscape? Because we really didn't know. I mean, like I said, we took over the space in January. I think they opened in February or March, so we were able to see it gave us an idea of whether they wanted it or not. And yeah, I mean, they opened to, press wrote about them a lot, and they were doing some good things. Again, this is something they learned over the years, but hospitality wasn't their bag, right? They were making fantastic drinks, and hospitality was a secondary notion to them. We opened, 11 months later, like I said, having no idea what we were doing. I am shocked, to tell you the truth, that anybody loved us in the first year and a half, because it was chaos behind the scenes, man. It was chaos. Like, I mean, nobody saw what we were doing every day,
Mm-hmm.
just to get the doors open and to, figure out, the construction of cocktails, and, we were labbing with, we're, having these bar labs without, the impromptu ones, like, what are we going to make today? It was kind of insane. We had a set menu, but, for BCs, which people still wanted, bartender's choices that people wanted back then, we were figuring out what we had in our pockets to do that. And we talk about that constantly. It was constant brainstorming and think tanking, etc. But we were, I didn't know when we opened. I had my only panic attack in my life that day. Like, are people going to care? Are people, what's going to be like a week from now? And we were like, the first 6 months, we were like a 2 to 3 hour wait on the weekends, and an hour wait other days. It got insane. We were written about constantly, and we'll talk about that later when we're talking about legacy bars. But we're figuring it out ourselves every day, and I feel like we're still figuring it out. I think that's okay. 14 years later, I mean, a different set of personalities and a different set of people, but we put our best foot forward every day and care about what's happening in our four walls. But the landscape of Denver bars has changed over the years. I mean, it's the fact that, and when I was at a place called Steuben's before I was at Williams and Graham, and that's where I developed the first cocktail program I ever really developed, like a first insightful, like, something that cared about construction of cocktails and stirring and shaking and the like. And I was actually looking at my first bar manual that I ever wrote for Steuben's just a couple of years ago. It still exists on a file, and it's incredible what I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know what I didn't know, but that's okay. I mean, we're all kind of geeked out about it. And even our first couple of Williams and Graham menus, like, they would be acceptable. I think right now, you talk about our 2011 menus, they would be acceptable, like, beginner level bar menus now, right? But I'm not ashamed of that in any way. It's not like we were figured out. Like, our foundational cocktail, the Blackberry Sage Smash, that we've had on our menu since the beginning, like, that was basically, it was basically classic riffs were on our, we had a raspberry clover club, et cetera, right? Like, that was what we started out with. But people were wowed by it. People were, if you talk about in 2011, people would see egg white on a drink cocktail and they would avoid it like the plague. Into like 5 years later, where people like, what egg white cocktails do you have? Like, they were excited about that, right? That it changed. And I think the consumer changed over the years, and I think we helped with that a little bit. So they started demanding more of their bars at restaurants and et cetera. And they expected, cocktail bar level style cocktails at other establishments. And it became part of the zeitgeist of Denver restaurants and the F&B scene, that not only did you have to build a culinary program, but you were building cocktail programs to complement that. And we saw that a lot more. The Denver cocktail scene grew up in restaurants first, right? It existed in some restaurants. It was a guy named Kai Belk at Elways. It was Brian Dayton at Frosca. You know, it was Ryan and Randy Lehman at Avenue Grill. You know, that were doing like restaurant bars. You know, Annika Zappi at Root Down. They were developing cocktail bartender bars, your cocktail programs in restaurant bars because there was no dedicated cocktail bars at the time. We opened, and then people saw that you can do that as, you know, where the cocktails came first and food came second, you know, or complemented, you know, the food complemented the cocktails rather than the other way around. And then people saw that model. And of course, you know, we all know that your cost of goods on cocktails is somewhat less than your cost of good on food. You know, so people saw that as a business model, and cocktail bars started to boom. You know, I mean, when we won Tales of the Cocktail top cocktail bar in 2015, you know, that was 4 years into our existence. We were the first non-coastal, non-major market bar in the United States to win. And look, man, we were like Trick Dog. The bars we were up against, I felt like we had zero possibility of winning. Right. So, you know, I was, just an aside, I was hammered at the Spirited Awards. It's like the second to last award. I never thought that I would be saying words up on stage at the end. So I had zero care about keeping my composure. And it was an embarrassing 30 seconds on stage up there. But, you know, like the fact that somebody, besides that, the fact that somebody recognized Denver was as important to me as the fact that somebody recognized our bar. Like our community, we had a very small, tight-knit community, you know, because we were all geeking out over the same things. I mean, I remember bringing a bottle of Rothman and Winter Creme de Violette to a bartenders guild meeting because I had found it at a bar at a liquor store in New York, and we had never seen it. You know, we had read about aviations, and we had never seen it. And this is hilarious, dude, because we made an aviation. We made an aviation at the first cocktail bar at the meeting. And I think everybody pretended to like it.
Or if you go to Insulin, like Hugo Insulin actual like specs, it's a fucking cocktail.
Oh yeah, no, we went. No, we went the original, you know, specs, and we're all geeked out. So we like jumped behind the bar at this Bartenders Guild meeting and made an aviation, and we all looked at each other like, we're supposed to like this, right? And it was fucking. I mean, it's fucking terrible. It tasted like potpourri and hand soap and all the things, like too much maraschino, too much Violette. You know, like it was
just a smidge of lemon. It's
it's just not good, right? So, but you know, I mean, we're a tight knit community, and the fact that somebody had recognized Denver and our community was really, really important to me, right? And I think that it was great for our staff, and our staff loved it, and it was a really, you know, it was a love letter to them because they had worked so hard over that course of time. And dude, we didn't have any of the things we had now. Our bartenders worked. And I'm embarrassed to say this now, our bartenders worked like 12 to 13 hour shifts. We did our own prep, you know, before I recognized that, you know, a 12-hour shift is not a badge of honor, you know, because I did it for years, right? You know, we didn't, you know, but, you know, they had done so much hard work, and it was such a tribute to them that I was really excited about it. And, you know, that changed. People started listening and stopping in Denver when they were going to Aspen Food and Wine. They would stop through Denver, and they would come to Williams and Graham, and we would guide them to some of our great neighborhood bars here and some of the other, you know, startup cocktail bars. And people saw, I mean, the local media and TV went nuts. The fact that we were recognized, you know, that a Denver bar was recognized nationally. I mean, forget it when we got on World's Top 50, you know, that we were all of a sudden on TV, you know, I mean, it was insane for that, you know, for that media machine, you know, to blow up. But I mean, our first lesson that, you know, my father told me, you know, is like, no award's going to jump off your wall and take care of your guests every day. you know, and it was really important for us to impress that on our staff. Like, we don't want the hubris that
Mhm.
I experienced when I first went to Tales of the Cocktail and didn't feel like one of the cool kids. We still want to make everybody feel like, that they're welcome into our home, and keep grounded, right? Was part of it. It's hard not to believe the hype, man. It's, it's hard not to, when people are writing about you all the time, and people, I will tell you, it's funny because the year before I had won a Tales the bartender award, the America's top bartender. Like, it's America's top model, right? It's it's like I won that. I won that, and I think for maybe like 15 minutes, I allowed myself to believe that I was like one of the best bartenders in the world, which is, it's an immeasurable thing. It isn't possible. There's no metric to it, right? And there's thousands and thousands of bartenders that were better bartenders than I am or was, right? But I was the most recognizable at the time, or the most popular at the time. It's a popularity contest. But to keep grounded was very important there. But like I said, Denver's scene changed a lot after that, because they saw that somebody can recognize somebody that's in a place other than Chicago, New York, LA, or Miami,
Yeah.
or San Francisco. Being the first bar that got recognized that wasn't one of those huge cities was really important, because others followed, right? I mean, I thought it was funny when the bar in Phoenix won. Damn it! Now it's
Oh,
awful.
Bitter and Twisted.
Yeah. No, not Bitter and Twisted. It was they won best bar in the U.S. Jason Asher and their bar there won in Phoenix 2 years ago, and it was like, we're somebody posted like they're the first small market bar to win best cocktail bar. I was like, hello. I mean, but I think that people started to think as Denver is a larger market
Mhm.
after that, like, as a recognizable cocktail market, because we did have some great things to follow, and Yacht Club followed up,
Yeah.
3 years ago, and a few years after us, as almost 10 years after us, as winning top cocktail bar in the United States, and that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That we have two, that Denver has two of those. But that just shows where our scene has grown over the years, that we've, that people have recognized it. It's not that, we weren't always doing good things here, or, people were working. I thought this was another ridiculous notion. People would come here over the years, and I'll tell this story a lot, is when I was working at a place called the Squeaky Bean, while we were opening Williams and Graham. And it was a restaurant, a beard nominated and recognized restaurant that brought me in to do a cocktail program there. And I made a Manhattan, put it out into for the service well. I was working in the well, and a bartender or the server came up to me and said, "This woman in the dining room really wants to talk to you about her drink." And I was like, "Oh shit, what did I do?" And I walked out to the dining room, and she was like, "This is honestly one of the best Manhattans that I've ever had. It's 3 ingredients." I'm like, "This is," in my head. And she's like, and she, she was like, "And I know, because I'm from Manhattan." And I was like, "Oh," there was like in the pit of my stomach, but it kind of felt like that for a while. It kind of felt like people would come from bigger cities and like pet you on the head. It's like, it's so cute you're doing cocktails here in Denver, But we even saw it from bartenders. Like, bartenders would come from like New York or San Francisco, and that was a big bragging point to them. Like, I come from this huge market. It's like I'm bringing my big city knowledge to your little hamlet.
Let me teach you how to drink.
Yeah, let me teach you how to do it. It's like, we have the internet, my friend. I mean, it's not, it's like not, the knowledge is not is something that's exclusive to big cities. Yeah. And teaching bartenders here that you don't have to be in one of those big cities to do innovative things. It's just they get recognized more there, and they're more competitive there, so they push each other a little bit more. If you recognize that, you can do things as amazing as they do, right? And don't limit yourself because you think it's territorial.
Hmm. So fast forward to 2015, you open up Occidental, which I feel is, I think I've posted it a couple of times. I've still got one of your shirts. You gave it to me at Tails in 2016. I think it was a Yelp review on the back.
Yeah.
I've worn that over the years. I definitely feel like Occidental definitely aligns a bit more with your personality.
Yeah.
And then Williams and Graham, you recently relatively recently put into the airport as well, the Denver airport.
Right. Yep.
How did that progression sort of make? Because like, it's one thing opening a bar. It's one thing opening a bar that's successful. But making that next jump, I think, as Bijou says, don't be a pussy. Like making that next to the second place, and then also like it kind of sets a tone for your legacy with a William and Graham being in the airport.
Yeah.
How did that progression come over the years?
So it's terrifying, man. Opening your first bar and then, you know, having opened to like immediate success, right? And it's hard to measure, you know, because like I said, there's chaos behind the scenes, but you know, people were packing in, and you know, it was, you know, we definitely had some media success. We had, you know, we had actual success, which two different things, two completely different things. You know, and you know, everybody's question is like, what's next? What's next for you? And it's like, I'm perfectly fine where we're at. And I really felt that, you know, I mean, you know, I had investors that were like, we're going to franchise. We're going to, you know, we've had all this success. We're going to open in all these cities. And we actually did go to Omaha, Nebraska to check out sites, you know, to do something. It did, you know, didn't sit well with me, like owning a bar that wasn't in the place that I was. But the building next to us came open in 2014. It was an old jewelry store. And the owner of the building came to me and he said, "Hey, I can never get into your bar." It was, you know, we can never get into your bar. Why don't you expand into this space next door? And I was like, I don't want to. We're perfect the size we are. I don't want to make it bigger. I don't want to make it more grand. I don't want private dining rooms and all those things. I love the size of our bar, but I will open a neighborhood bar. You know, so we announced opening a neighborhood bar, you know, and we put a plan together, and we opened up Williams and Graham for what we felt Denver needed at the time. Like, it was you know, that was something that didn't exist. We were taking the cocktail programs that existed in restaurants and concentrating it into a cocktail bar. And we thought we could, you know, we thought the Denver F&B community as a whole could use a cocktail bar in its, you know, in the community. But I will admit that Occidental was 100% self-indulgent. Really, I just wanted it to be a bar that I wanted to hang out in. Not that I didn't want to hang out at Williams and Graham, but that I would want to be at, you know, like a few days a week. That I wanted to be my third place. You know, the place that was, you know, that I wanted to be. You know, my cheers moment for that. You know, that I felt like that really didn't exist in Denver. You know, a place that could do great cocktails behind the bar, but in t-shirts and jeans.
Yeah.
You know, and with TVs on the walls, and you know, this is a quick funny story. When I told my dad about Williams and Graham, you know, lifelong bartender, you know, and he laughs about this day. I was like, I explained the whole concept to me. He's like, "You're opening a bar without TVs?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Never gonna work. Never gonna work." Thanks, Dad. Very encouraging. And every time he comes to the bar and he sees how busy it is, he's like, I'm eating my words. You know, like he still lives in Jersey, but when he flies out, you know, but you know, we figured we can do all those things that we do behind the bar and have the same standards behind the bar as a neighborhood bar, but still offer, you know, PBRs and, you know, and Olympias and inexpensive, you know, great wells, you know, have the wells still be a call, you know, like have products that are still quality, but that people can drink for, you know, a little bit less, you know, more open, more lights, all, you know, all those things. And, you know, I was able to have my wife concept it, right, which meant a lot to me. You know, I told Bijou, I was like, design a bar that we would want to hang out with, and, you know, want to hang out at when we got off of our shifts, and you know, because she was in the industry for a little while as well. And she put together a great bar. She saw our personality and put it on the walls. And, we're hoping that everybody has loved it. Now, the challenge there is we've already opened one incredibly successful bar that,
Mhm.
got a bunch of media attention. So the pressure on number two is insane, right? Because people wrote about it for almost a year while we were building it, and the buildup was insane. And to be honest, we weren't immediately successful. Like it wasn't the gangbusters success that out the door that Williams and Graham was. Um, because we were very industry focused, right?
Mhm.
We did, we had family meal, which is something we did. We made a family meal that we would make for our staff every night, but made a bunch of extra so that if you came in and got off your shift at the end of every night, you could have some of our family meal if you asked, which is really important. The Occidental was not only for, the everyday person in our community, but was also, I built it for us,
Mhm.
not just for me, but for people like me. And, want to be the place that, we did, we had our, well shots and, we had a shot and beer for $5. It was a well shot and a Genesee cream ale
Yeah.
was together was was $5 at the time, and we wanted to be the place that when you got off of work, that was your comfortable place, the place that you were able to unwind after your shift. So we got the industry attention at the end of the night. So like, we'd be moderately busy until 10:30, and then at 10:30, 10:30 to 1 on even every weeknight, we had the crowds.
Mhm.
And through that, they talked about us enough to where we built it up, you know, and also we built it as we are in New York, as well as having more of a punk rock level theme.
Mhm.
Um, we also are a New York theme bar, like we have all New York sports
Mhm.
and et cetera. And there's a lot of people moved in the early 2000s. People moved here from all over the country. I mean, it really, Denver blew up, and a lot of people from the coast came here, and there's a lot of New Yorkers here. So we kind of like combined the two, and now Williams and Graham or Occidental is as busy as Williams and Graham. You know, the numbers are almost exactly the same. Where it used to be like Williams and Graham's cute little brother.
Yeah.
You know, now it's about the same. And honestly, Occidental, has a back patio and it has outdoor space
Mm.
and things like that. Occidental saved our asses during the pandemic. We were only allowed to have 24 people in the building post pandemic. Like when they allowed us to be open in Williams and Graham, which doesn't keep the lights on. But Occidental, we had outdoor space, and we were allowed to have almost 80 people in Occidental. So Occidental saved our bacon as far as keeping the doors open. So, I mean, it became as important as Williams and Graham over the years, and it really is an industry hub. I mean, I was behind the bar last night for a food drive that we did, and we're surrounded by industry, and tonight we have the Hustle, which is an industry event. So it's become the hub in that neighborhood, where people get off of work.
So let's talk about the airport, because obviously,
Yeah. Oh, I just lost audio. Hold on.
No, I'm muted. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
I have no idea what just happened. I just had a little blip. I'm just going to just double check that on my end. No microphone.
I can hear you.
Oh, come here.
So talk about the airport, the Williams and Graham
Right.
and the airport, because that's sort of like that. That's a great little segue into like the legacy of the brand and the bar.
Right.
Obviously, like I know what airports are like when it comes to operations, and it is very different in every airport. Usually, it's a unionized staff. It's not necessarily your staff. How did that sort of come about, and that sort of like lean into that legacy of W&G now in the airport space in Denver?
Right. When the airport, the people at the airport approached us in 2017, right? So after we had won some of the awards, we got them noticed. The franchisees at the airport, the concessionaires at the airport recognized that, they wanted to put us, our name was recognizable. They wanted to put us in the airport. And honestly, the first time they came to me, I was like, was like, fuck no, absolutely not. You know, um, it's not gonna happen. And because I always believed in Williams and Graham as a unique space. I never wanted to open a
Mhm.
second Williams and Graham, right, with that name. Because I think that, that what it's part of what made it unique is it was in its own place, and I didn't want to try and replicate that because I think there's always failures in replication.
Mhm.
But I met with the people there, and they explained what we could and couldn't do, and I warmed to it over the next year. And I said, let's figure it out. Let's just, I didn't want to have this in my head that it can't be done.
Mhm.
With hospitality, all things are possible, right? In my head, I felt like if we could nail the hospitality piece, if we can get that done right. And I mean, what place needs more hospitality than an airport? Like, I mean,
Yep.
if you think about it, people are at some of their most stressful situations in the world, in their lives. They're at this in celebratory, they're going on vacation. They might be traveling for a wedding or a funeral, or they're delayed or whatever. There's so many opportunities to practice great hospitality in an airport. I was kind of like, karmically, it's a fantastic thing, right? We can help people's day be better. And if we can do that part, the cocktails kind of take a back seat to it in some places. And I'm like, and we can make a cocktail program that makes sense in the airport. I was like,
Yeah.
I rather than put it in my mind like we can't do this, I was like, we can do this, and we can. At the very worst, it's a billboard that thousands of people walk by every day, right? That's at its very worst, right? Even if it failed, right? It gave us that, right? So, we went, everything got delayed. Airport, as construction happens, and, it took 8 years from the first minute, the first day we opened, the first day we decided we were going to do it, to the day we got open. So we had time to develop planning and make it happen. And we brought all of the staff in from the airport through our bars and had them spend some time with us. We felt like if we can have them, if our staff, who are true believers in hospitality, almost to an obsessive point, if we can bring the airport staff in and have them believe in us, because it's a concessionaire franchisee, it's like a
Yeah.
franchisee situation. We don't own that bar, right? We are, they license our name and our concept, and we have protections and contracts, so they keep well. And I meet with them every week, and we talk about all the things that we can do to all little fixes we can make, how I can help them. I just gave them a holiday menu, a hot drinks menu to do throughout the winter. We're very close to the development. They don't change any cocktails or things the sort without us. We do all of the development of the product that goes across the bar. And our style of hospitality, we built them manuals, and everybody that goes behind the bar there has to spend a couple weeks with us, right? So they get it.
Mhm.
And even to the point where it's fantastic, and that they become guardians of our brand, right?
Mhm.
And if we have them become evangelists and guardians of our brand, then they protect it. If they believe in us, or what the airport refers to the street side location, if they believe
Yep.
in the street side location, right, and what we do, then they bring it to the bar behind them at the bar. And it's pretty fantastic. Like, I love, as much as I travel, and I do travel doing large event work, and do some consulting here and there. Um, I think to be able to visit a bar that is yours, and a concept that you put together,
Mhm.
at the airport, is fantastic, because I also I have a I have a good idea of what a good airport bar should be, because I'm in so many airports, and it's always the same. It's every concessionaire has, like, they'll have, like, these distributor partnerships, and
Yeah.
so you look at the same 5 spirits behind the bar that are in every single one,
Yeah.
and the best whiskey you can make is X, and that you can find is X. And we had that agreement right away that no partnership would supersede our menu, right?
Mm.
That we would choose the spirits on the back bar and in the cocktails, and we would curate that. so that, you know, we weren't a slave to whatever their mandates were, you know, by their brand. And that was really important to us. So, but a lot of people looked at us, and a lot of people in the community were like, you know, that's selling out. It's like your favorite punk rock band, you know, signing to a major label, like sellouts, like, you know, they finally made some money and you're pissed at them, you know? And it was, you know, I mean, this is for us, this is kind of, you know, it's kind of a way that it's putting money in our bank so we can take care of our staff and take care of our
Mhm.
team and do the things that we can give back to our own team. That made it important for us, right? So it allows us, it gives us some financial flexibility, because over the years things have gotten more expensive, you know, and unless I'm going to go to $30 cocktails, you know, the margins are thinner each year,
Yeah.
you know, especially now we're talking tariffs and all the BS that we're dealing with, right? The margins are a lot thinner. So this gives us some of that flexibility. And it's great. I think it's fantastic. I think it's better than I imagined it to work out. And I'm so proud of the bar staff there. They feel like we brought them in, you know, they're on our Slack, you know,
Yeah.
our communication, they're on our workplace communication. They get the same employee discounts that, you know, at our bar that ours do. And, you know, on their time off, and we treat them like just part of our family, not like just the airport family. Right.
Yeah, for sure. So let's because I don't want to keep you much longer, but like, let's talk about being the patriarch of this legacy, because we talked about it in the green room, and I talk about it quite a lot. Like, legacy bars are, I find, tougher to run going forward, because it's in this day and age of like the newest thing is the coolest thing. Like, the lifespan of a bar, like we talk about 10, 15 years ago, the lifespan of a bar is 2 years because it didn't work out.
Right.
But now it's sometimes like 2 years because it's a new concept next, and
Yeah.
an expansion there, and there's 3 of them over in the same country. So, as you were saying about franchising and making another bar, the same bar in a different part of the country.
Right.
How do you oversee the legacy, and how do you keep the bars fresh and while still being rooted in that legacy for your team?
Right. I mean, you know, Williams and Graham and Occidental, they have an ethos, right? You know, I mean,
Mhm.
we want to, you know, we want to keep creative. We want to challenge everybody's creativity. We want to put amazing drinks across the bar, right? That's never changed. You know, that's always been part of, everybody is involved in what we do every day. You know, and there, everybody's involved in the menu creation. You know, every single one of our bars, you're not guaranteed a drink on the menu, but everybody works
Mhm.
to get them on the menus, right? Um, you know, and challenging that creativity, the motivation because the motivation can't be the awards, it can't be the recognition, it has to be the satisfaction of your guests every day. You know, when you know, the first like 6 years of our existence, the people wrote about us ad nauseum, right? I mean, we're getting written about nationally, we're getting written about locally. We were getting asked to do guest bartending shifts you know, in places and takeovers and pop-ups and things like that. And that stuff sort of faded over the years because we're not the newest, you know, we're not the you know, the shiniest penny, and we're not the newest kid on the block, right? And the challenge is to keep your staff motivated when the tails plates aren't coming in, and you know, the articles, you're not ending up on, you know, the Esquire lists and those things. I mean, I actually reached out to, you know, like our local free magazine, you know, our Village Voice magazine here, the Westward. I reached out to the editor 1 year after a while, as you know, just she and I sat down over a drink. I'm like, nobody writes about us anymore. She's like, yeah, because they've written about you you know, so much over the course of the 6 years. You're no longer new. It's not exciting anymore, right? So you know, we turn in to make sure that we make the people, you know, that walk inside our 4 walls busy every day, or we would try to make everybody that walks inside our 4 walls the happiest we can make them, right? And putting a great product over the bar, making, you know, trying to change their day for the positive, you know, and engaging with our guests and creating relationships and all of those things. They become evangelists for us when they walk out, right?
Mhm.
And that is our satisfaction. That is our awards, right? You know, and that's what it has to be, our motivation. If that brings us more recognition outside of our walls again at some point, that's fantastic, right? But we have to be comfortable in the fact that, and you know, and be able to say, like, it's been difficult for me to say, because it sounds like you're walking with a lot of hubris. Yes, Williams and Graham has had an incredible influence on Denver's scene, right? To say those words has not been easy for me over the years. But my wife will tell me all the time, you have to, Biju's amazing to this. She tells me, like, you have to accept your place in the community. You have to accept that you've inspired people as a person, that your bar has inspired other bars, like that, that who you are in the community. You can't constantly shy away from it. And we have to accept that fact. And our bartenders accept that, that we work in this, that they work in a bar that has had an incredible influence on our community, and we work to hold ourselves to that standard every day, right? And we have to be proud of that, and proud of what you do every day behind the bar has to be the single motivating factor. Because if that inspires recognition, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't, you've made your guests happy every day, and you're making money, because the money follows, right? Build it and they will come. If you don't care about the money that comes out of somebody's pocket and into yours, right? And you care about the person more than that, the money is going to show up. If you don't look at the tip line on every check, and just look at what you made at the end of every night, then you're going to be fine. And it's that's got to be the motivating factor for a bartender. Is guest satisfaction, because everything will follow that if you do it right. And if you inspire a group of bartenders and a group of hospitality people to do the exact same thing, and you're a like-minded group, then great things can happen. With community, it can happen, right? And you take care of your greater community, right? Like we said, we're, with all the SNAP benefits going away, we're involved in our community with a way that we care that people are facing food insecurity in our community. We care that ICE is coming and chasing away people in the F&B community, and going after the marginalized people in our community. We care about that, and we'll fight for them every step of the way. Our bar, as a part of our community, is as important to us as anything else, right? And we feel like we need to be a hub, a place of safety for them, and advocates for them all the way, or we're not doing it right. And keeping our team with that same ethos, and holding them to that, as being important, is something that really it's motivated me and keeps my heart in it. Owning a bar is not going to make you wealthy in a lot of ways. I think it's not a fast track to wealth, but it's a fast track to fulfillment for me. I feel fulfilled as a human being because of what we've done over the years, right? And making people happy, and making our staff happy, and investing in them. And it's not the bank account that is benefiting from that. It's my soul that benefits from it, and sometimes the two balance out.
Man, I could talk to you all day long, I swear. So we're at the stage of the podcast that I ask 5 deep podcast questions. I ask every guest these questions.
Maybe I should have watched a few more so I could be ready for this part.
What is one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Whew.
Personal or business?
Right. I'd go back to to my childhood, and feeling like an outsider at school, and feeling like loved and accepted at my father's bar. My brother and I, we used to have to, we got chased home a lot, because there was a lot of fights, and we were not the most popular kids at our school, but I would literally run to my father's bar to be part of it. I've spent the entirety of my career trying to recreate that love and acceptance, that feeling of love and acceptance for guests in our bar, right? And whether it was guests in front of me as a bartender who didn't own anything, or now as a bar owner, that was very important. I would also say that I never, when I opened a bar for the first time as a bartender, I was terrified, but I wanted to be the owner that I always wanted to work for, but never found the opportunity. And I learned as much from the horrible people that I worked for, the people that treated people poorly and took them for granted because I never wanted to be that guy, as much as I learned from the people that taught me the importance of community and the importance of giving back. Right. I mean, I learned as much from both of those people. That shaped me as a bartender and an owner, as a bar owner. And I think what shapes me as a bartender, as I still identify as a bartender, right? I still think of I think of owning a bar as I have a different set of guests. They just happen to be the staff that we work with right now. And if I show them love, that love translates to our guests, right? So that's the ethos that I want. That's what I've learned from the years of experience that I bring to it, and I'm still learning every fucking day, man. I learn from a lot of a lot of our younger bartenders about new techniques and things because they're constantly on the books. I'm busy. I don't have a lot of time to learn about new techniques and all those kind of things, but they teach me about it. I'll come behind the bar and I'll learn from them, which is fantastic. I can't ever get to the point where I feel like I've got to stop learning about what I'm doing.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
I mean, take life. I treat life like I do behind the bar, and I'm going to sound like a broken record. There is, if people that come into my space, leave in a better place, then karmically I feel good about it, right? When I used to hire bartenders directly all the time, I would take people to, out to coffee, right? And I would wait for them. I would get there early. I'd wait for them in the coffee shop. And when we got there, I would go up to the counter with them to order because I wanted to see how they treated the person behind the counter, right? Did they make eye contact with them? Did they say hello before they started barking an order at them? Did they treat that person like a person and not a vending machine? It's really important to me walking through everyday life to make eye contact with people, to say hello to people, to give people friendly nods, to connect. I think that I treat my outside life a lot like I do my life behind a bar. And that's something I learned. I wasn't that way before as a bartender, and it's something that developed over the years, but I learned a lot from bartending about how to be a better person, how to be a better member of a community or a member in our community. And I'm not perfect. I've made a shit ton of mistakes over the years, but learning from those mistakes, accepting those mistakes as horrible as they've been at some points, has shaped me as a, bartending has shaped me as a human being. And I think that's, it's given back to me as much as I've given it to it.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like what, I've learned a ton of lessons over the years. I wish I had learned a little bit more about self-confidence, and Bijou, my wife has taught me over the years. And I alluded to this earlier, like you have to accept, a certain level of influence. You have to accept, how you're perceived by other people when it's positive.
Mm-hmm.
I have an incredible amount of imposter syndrome, and dude, even to the point where I was standing up on stage the year I won Tales of the Cocktail Best Bartender, like how in my mind, like these people have no idea, like I've like I don't deserve to be standing up here like everybody else does, and I don't know how I got to this point, right? And I think I wish I'd learned to accept that a little earlier, to accept a little bit of more comfort in my own skin. And that's just something that's happened over just in the past year or so, and to be okay with it, and I think that, work isn't life, and I'm still really bad at that. It's still like, I have to be better at my own life than I am at work, and have them not be so intertwined sometimes.
Mm.
I wish I'd learned that earlier, and I'm still a work in progress.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
Right. Yes. My success, like I said earlier, my success is happiness within my soul, within, um, to be comfortable in my own skin. It used to be financial. I used to think that money would bring me all the success in the world. Money would bring us happiness, and yeah, and the financial stuff is important. Being comfortable, but you know, not having all the things, and I think um, success is is to me is being the best human being I can be, and 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 having that and making that impression on the people around me. I'm not going to have any kids, right?
Mhm.
Never. It's not in it was never in the plan. But when you think about legacy is the impression you leave on the people around you. And I hope for that to be positive all the way around. I mean, I'm not there's as many people there's probably as many people that dislike who I am than like me, but I have to be comfortable with the fact that I'm being the best person I can be all the time. And that is to me that's success.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it? You just mentioned legacy, so I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
do I ask the question? I've told them I've got 5 questions, but if I don't ask the last question,
Yeah, no, that's okay. You know, I hope that my legacy to people is that, that I lived and breathed hospitality in my life and my work, right? That, you know, that that they that people see this. There's everybody has a certain amount of ego, you know, but sometimes you have to put it aside for the greater good. And I'm not perfect, and I don't strive for perfection, and there's a shit ton of mistakes, but I think you know that I want my legacy to be that I always did my best for others, and then took care of myself at some point. I mean, in hospitality, we do a lot that is always about taking care of others, and we forget about ourselves a lot. And I think that in mental health and stress and not overworking yourself as a badge of honor, I think that's super important, that a lot of us don't take care of ourselves because we're so focused on taking care of other people. And I'm still learning that. And I hope at some point, the legacy is that, like, that guy found the balance between taking care of himself and taking care of others, right? And just being a good person, and I think that's important.
and final question: what is your go-to classic cocktail
Yeah.
to lighten the end of the
Yeah,
podcast?
no, I mean, so the first, like, classic cocktail outside the basics that I found was the Vieux Carré.
Mm.
And I ran around a Vieux Carré, like, it it became my cocktail that I would, like, finish my shift with. I actually taught the bartenders at the bar across the street from me, because I worked at a restaurant called Steuben's here, that I would get off at like 11 o'clock at night, and the bar across the street was open till midnight or one. Um, and I taught the bartenders over there how to make a Vieux Carré so that I could drink one at the end of every shift. And it was the one cocktail that stopped the world around me. Right? It was complex. It was strong. It was all of the good things, and it also had an evolution to it. Right? It would start strong and extremely complex and like overwhelmingly aromatic, and it would smooth out as you drank it. And it was my, like, post shift drink. And I'll never forget that. Like, I turned so many people on to the Vieux Carré as a off the beaten path classic in 2011 to 2014, that we still serve a ton of them at Williams and Graham. And I still, I'm not going to go to my neighborhood dive bar and order it, but I love that cocktail still. And I go back to it all the time. And without being completely pretentious about ordering, I love that cocktail. Still do, not going away from it, and I'll drink it anytime.
That's awesome. Well, man, like I said, I could literally spend all day long with you and just hang out and chill. But this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. So I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so glad that I can't remember if you hit me up or I hit you up, and I can't remember how it all sort of came about. But like, I'm just glad. I like to be reminded sometimes of people that I've looked up to and seen. Like a lot of the things you've done over the years that I've like tried to aspire to. So I'm just glad that I eventually got you down on tape.
Right. And, you know, I think to answer that, I think you reached out to me a few years ago, and then I just reached back out like this summer at some point.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, let's finally make that happen, you know, just to be good, man. And look, man, I think if I was to say any final word here, it's, you know, looking at where we at and where our society is right now, bars are more important than ever to be safe spaces for places and to be also, you know, giving back to our communities that are in need. You know, and dude, I also look up to you, and I've loved watching your podcast, and you've had some amazing guests over the time, but dude, you're the foundation to it, you know, and you're the constant, and hearing your takes on things and your responses to people is just as important as the guests you have on, you know.
Thanks,
if you could be a guest on your own podcast, right? I mean, I think that would be that's just as important as the people you've had on. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'll enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
And just thank you so much for everything.
All right. Thank you, man. Take care.
All right, post shifters. That's it for now. Keep your standards high, your spirits neat, and your team tighter than your pork costs. Catch you next week on the Post Shift Podcast.